Here in America, the Range Rover family is almost like a sub-brand within the Land Rover portfolio. In total, the company offers a choice of 4 different models to choose from, and today I'm standing by the newest edition of the Range Rover family. Meet the 2020 Land Rover Range Rover, hold on, wait a second. 2020 Land Rover Range Rover Velar SVAutobiography Dynamic Edition. Yeah, I think I got that right. That's literally 22 syllables long, and it could quite possibly be the longest name in automotive history. So regardless of its silly name, the Range Rover Velar is the newest member of the family, and it slots right below the Range Rover Sport, which is the best-selling Land Rover in America at about 25,000 units sold every year. Now, to make the Velar, Land Rover essentially took the same platform that underpins the Jaguar F-Pace, made it about 3 inches longer, and they gave this car probably the sexiest styling that we've ever seen on a Range Rover product to date. Now, this particular one here with the ridiculously long SVAutobiography Dynamic Edition means that under the hood, we have the same powertrain that underpins the SVR version of the F-Pace. That's right, a fire-breathing 5-liter supercharged V8 with about 550 horsepower. So with its sleek design, supercharged V8, and typical qualities that people love about a Land Rover, the big question I want answered is the all-new Range Rover Velar SVAutobiography Dynamic Edition the ultimate Range Rover you can buy? That's what we're here to find out. Now, when you've got a Land Rover with the SV badge, the first thing you want to talk about, of course, is what's found underneath the hood. And this is what makes the SVAutobiography Dynamic Edition very special. It essentially has the motor that enthusiasts have been begging and crying Land Rover to give it for the last 2 years. This is the company's 5-liter supercharged V8. That's right, this has a V8 engine displacing 5 liters with a big blower on top of it. You can see it's shown right there at the top. There's no engine cover on this, which I actually find to be extremely refreshing. It actually makes the same horsepower as the Jaguar F-Pace, 550 horsepower and 502 pound-feet of torque. Compared to the other top engine, which was a 3-liter supercharged V6, this has roughly almost 200 more horsepower, which is an insane amount of power for something like this. I love the fact that Land Rover was able to stuff the V8 underneath this small hood. Now, they did say they had to make a couple of modifications in here to make the actual V8 fit, but as you can see, it's a little bit of a snug fit, and with 550 horsepower, Land Rover says you'll get to 60 in around 4 seconds flat. You'll easily reach a top speed of around 155 miles an hour. That is going to be electronically governed. Now, of course, this is still an SUV, so you can still tow a pretty good amount with it. Land Rover says with the tow package, you'll tow a little over 5,500 pounds. Fuel economy, in case you have to ask, is rated at 15 in the city, 20 on the highway. Please be sure to put premium gas in this thing. Land Rovers are typically heavy vehicles. This one, as it sits, weighs around 5,000 pounds, just under 5,000 pounds. All that power is going through an 8-speed automatic with, of course, all-wheel drive as the standard motivation for putting all that power down. Now, when Land Rover first introduced the Velar about 2 years ago, its design really turned a lot of heads. Essentially, what they did is they took the same sleek styling that they showed on the Evoque and made it on a vehicle that's a little bit larger, actually a lot larger. This vehicle underpins the same platform as the Jaguar F-Pace, as I mentioned, so it's a slightly different vehicle, of course, versus the Range Rover Sport, the Big Daddy Range Rover, and the Range Rover Evoque. In case those of you are wondering, what's the point of having another Range Rover model? We'll get into that in just a moment. As you can see here, the SVAutobiography Dynamic Edition includes some of its own unique styling elements. The grille, of course, is blacked out. They're slightly larger to help feed air into that supercharged V8. Down here, you can see there's a lot of functional cooling. You have these functional air intakes with more of the black accents. I like the LED fog lights that you get on this particular one here, and you also get LED headlights as standard on the Autobiography Dynamic Edition. You can see it also includes LED turn signals, LED daytime running lights. I love the super slim look of the headlights. This has been kind of the face of Land Rover for years. It's aged extremely well. This car will be good looking for many years to come. It's one of the reasons why Land Rover does really well, especially with those big Range Rover badges spelled across the hood. This is a car that a lot of people aspire to own. It's something that, you know, celebrities buy, something a lot of wealthy people buy. And again, Land Rover may not have the best reputation for reliability here in the US, but a lot of people who tend to lease cars and replace them every couple of years really put these at the top of their list. Now, looking at the rest of the styling of the Velar, you can see it is a significantly bigger vehicle versus the Evoque. At about 189 inches long. This is about a foot longer versus the Evoque, but it's about 3 inches shorter versus a Range Rover Sport and about 3 inches longer versus the Jaguar F-Pace, its sister vehicle. Its wheelbase is shared with the F-Pace at 113 inches long. Ground clearance for this car ranges from like as low as like 6.5 inches to all the way a little over 8 inches when you guys have the air suspension. Right now, the suspension is kind of in its normal setting, which should give it like around 7 inches of ground clearance. Now, you can see my tester here has these massive set of 22-inch wheels wrapped in 265 40 width tires. Now, of course, these tires are probably not what you're going to be using if you're actually planning to take your Range Rover Velar off-road, but this is a Land Rover product, and Land Rover promises you can still go off-roading with this vehicle. It doesn't quite have the same capability as something like the Big Daddy Range Rover or the Range Rover Sport or the Discovery or the upcoming Defender, but it still will hold its own, especially with the adjustable suspension. You can see there's upgraded brakes here. And really, my tester with this silver color, which is the only a free color, you can basically spec out this car to have a color that will be almost $10,000 with these kind of silver wheels. It looks a little bit plain Jane for me, a little bit basic, but again, color is always subjective. This car has very clean lines everywhere you look at it. I really especially love the kind of almost like a sloping roof area, but it's a little bit more boxy. I like how they're kind of making the D-pillar here appear like it's floating, but it's done in a much more tasteful way versus some of the other competing vehicles that introduced a similar styling dynamic. Now, at the rear, you can see this is the vehicle that started the trend of all Land Rover products to have kind of this blacked out portion here that connects the two taillights together. You can see Range Rover is again boldly spelled out in the back. It kind of has this like diamond pleating in the actual text, which makes it look a little bit more aggressive. You can see there are full LED taillights here, which kind of have a three-dimensional look to it. I last saw something like this on a Lexus LC500, which again, makes this car look extremely high class. You can see there's a subtle little SV Autobiography badge, and you can see here the exhaust system. You know, when I first saw the back end of this car, I liked the look until I looked at these fake exhausts, which again, they're part of the actual rear bumper treatment. The actual pipes aren't connected to it. It is nice that it's a quad outlet, but to me, they almost look like beaver teeth. They just look a little bit awkwardly designed, but you can't argue with the sound. Let's fire up that V8 so you guys can hear what it sounds like real quick. And just like the Jaguar I-Pace, this thing makes a really mean noise. You could really get into a lot of trouble with this car, so I'm really looking forward to taking it out on the test drive. Now, opening up the trunk, this is an SUV, remember, so it needs to be practical. And Land Rover says you have a fairly good amount of space, a little over 30 cubic feet of space with the seats up. There is no third row seat available on the Velar. You need to go for a Range Rover Sport if you want that. If you fold down all the seats, you get a little over 62 cubic feet of space. So very good numbers, about 10 more cubic feet than what you're gonna get in the Range Rover Evoque, but slightly less versus what you're going to get in the Range Rover Sport. So the exterior of the Velar definitely has the Range Rover look, but what about the interior? Now, first getting inside this SV Autobiography Dynamic Edition, Jesus, that name is really long. Shutting the door, you can hear it has that typical solid thunk, although I'm surprised this car does not have soft closing doors. I suspect that they only will reserve that for the higher end models, although this car here with its near six-figure price tag is definitely up there with anything that's, you know, expensive in this segment of vehicle. Now, to start the car up, ooh, that sounds really nice when this thing starts up. Now, as you can see, here is the key for the vehicle. It's the typical Range Rover key. It even says Range Rover on the side of it. It has the typical buttons on it. It has the company's push button start, and it has the smart entry system. So when you get inside the vehicle, if you guys have been in some newer Land Rover products, you're going to be very familiar with this interior. In fact, the Velar was the first vehicle to introduce the in-touch control duo screen, the two-screen layout. This was the first car to get it in 2018. It's been trickling over into all the other vehicles since then. This two-screen layout is definitely very expensive looking for me. I like the graphics. I like the integrated look. I know some of you have criticized me in the past because I don't like the two-screen layout in Infiniti and the older or the current Acura products, but I think this is the way that it should be done because I love all the, you know, the glass smoothness of the screen. It kind of meshes in well with the piano black plastic. I like how you can adjust this top screen here, which is a 10¼ inches to kind of tilt forward to help you give a better look. And also the graphics look great. I mean, look at the way this looks over here, the way the navigation system looks over here. It's all very expensive looking. My issue with it, and this is something that Land Rover has been continuously trying to improve over the years, is it beefing up the processing speed. The screen itself is just a little bit slow as we go into the different settings, which is a little bit annoying, especially when you first start the car up. You can see here, the seats are heated and cooled, and they also have a massage function. And the massage function, you can literally set the massage to start either 5 or 30 minutes after you've gotten into the vehicle automatically. So this is the reason why the Range Rover subdivision is typically an expensive car, because this interior looks and feels and smells expensive. I mean, check out the dashboard. It's covered in the same beautiful soft leather as the seats on the upper part and the lower part. Now, this is optional. If you guys go for the baser trims of the Velar, you won't have the leather dash until you spec in an option for like another $3,000. The piano black plastic is a little bit annoying because it shows fingerprints, but when it looks clean, or when it is clean, it looks fantastic. The steering wheel, as you can see here, is tilt and telescoping. I like the fact that it kind of has the beige color for the airbag cover, and then you have the contrasting stitching. The leather also feels really nice. The door panels have the same kind of leather stitching that's on the dash. Onto the door panels, you have metal trim, metal accented door handles. The windows are one-touch automatic for all four. You kind of expect that in a vehicle like this. You also have 3-person memory seats on both sides. So again, a lot of the luxury and tech features that you expect. My tester here also has a heads-up display, which is actually a $1,000 option. It's a little bit frustrating that it's not, but the Meridian sound system in this car is the base one. It's 17 speakers, like 825 watts of power. It sounds phenomenal. Actually, for another $3,000, you could spec in a 23-speaker Meridian sound system, which I'm sure sounds even better. I don't really see the need because this already has one of the best sounding sound systems in the segment. This touchscreen, as you can see here, also includes Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but as you can see, I've touched it and it's still taking a second to activate, which it was working perfectly for me earlier. So again, they could do a little bit more improvements here. Now, putting the vehicle into reverse, you can see there is a very nice backup camera that has parking sensors front and rear. It also has the ability to automatically parallel park for you. It has a 360 camera, which is nice. If you push that button here, it'll give you different views. And if you just kind of push the button here when it's in drive, it should give you a top-down 360 view, but it doesn't seem, oh, there it goes. Again, you can see here that it's a little bit laggy. I just want it to be a little bit faster. And I also don't like how it's a very small display here when I have the 360 camera. If I try putting it into reverse again here, for some reason it's not letting me activate the 360 camera there. But again, the graphics look good. They just need to make this a faster processing screen, which I'm sure Land Rover has heard the complaints. They're going to be offering continuous updates over the years, so that's something that you kind of expect in this segment of vehicle. Over here in the rest of the center console, this second screen here controls things like your climate, your seats, your vehicle. You can change the vehicle settings over here. You can see there's a dynamic sport mode here. There's an eco mode. There's also a comfort mode, and then of course, my tester has the all-terrain package, so you can kind of adjust what kind of terrain you're on, and the computer will automatically adjust that. You can also raise and lower the air suspension from over here, which is really cool. When it's in off-road, it'll give you a little over 8 inches of ground clearance. There's also a little button in here to make the exhaust extra loud. That noise coming out of a car like this is just really cool. A lot of people don't expect something like that in something that looks like this. Now, looking at the rest of the center stack, you can see you have these two big dials over here. This can either control your seat controls, your automatic climate control. You have a little small dial here for your volume. There's a little small cup holder over here. There's 2 cup holders over here, and you have a little bit of a storage area over here. Keep in mind, some competitors do offer a little bit more storage in this car. It's kind of lacking. I also really like the gear shift knob. This controls the 8-speed ZF automatic. The knob itself feels really sturdy. I love the metal look, metal trim that it gives you. It just feels expensive. It kind of goes with the rest of this interior because you expect stuff like this in a Range Rover product. The center console here, you can see, opens up in 2 different ways. I will say that it's a very small storage area. It's very shallow, even though it's a good size. You really can't put too many things in here because this part here will also crush whatever you're putting in there. So be careful of that whenever you guys are, putting fragile things in the center console. The glove compartment here, you can see, is actually pretty small. It is damped, but lined with felt. And then the seats, let me lastly talk about that. These are adjustable in like 22 different ways. They're heated, they're cooled, massaging. I like the fact that you have this very soft pillow here on the actual headrest. I found them to be quite comfortable, especially with the massage feature. Then my tester above me has this massive panoramic sunroof, although it doesn't have the gesture control that the Range Rover Sport had that I showed you guys, where you can kind of just wave my finger forward. If you want to close the sunshade, you have to manually push the button, and instead you can't do this, which honestly didn't work very well. So overall, this interior reminds me a lot of the last Range Rover Sport that I was in, or any other Range Rover product. Has a lot of the features and tech. It's very comfortable. It's somewhat easy to use, but what Land Rover really needs to fix is the speed of this screen. It's just dreadfully slow at times, and for nearly $100,000, I expected it to be a lot faster. So right now the car is in its off-road setting, which gives it a little over 8 inches of ground clearance. There are no running boards, but at 5'7", I can still kind of get in this car pretty easily, even though it's in its off-road setting. When I shut the door and get into the back seat, you can see the space back here. Land Rover says there's around 36 inches of legroom, which is about 3 more inches versus what you get in the Evoque. So it is more space, but for a car that has a 113-inch long wheelbase, this back seat is still pretty tight, especially when you look at some of the competition. You can see the seat backs themselves, they take up a lot of overall space back here. There's a massive hump that takes up the space in the center position. There is a good amount of foot space here, but even somebody who's short like myself, I find the space to be pretty lacking. So what isn't lacking for me, however, is the headroom. So I guess people over 6 feet tall at least will have a decent amount of head space, even though their legroom is kind of compromised. The materials back here are also very nice, soft leather everywhere, metal speaker covers, metal door handle, accent trim. You have rear seat air vents here, your own set of climate controls. This car offers either 3 or 4 zone climate control. And then as you can see here, there's a nice armrest that folds down. So obviously this is much better versus the Range Rover Evoque, but I suspect the Sport and the Big Daddy Range Rover are still going to give you more space in the back, but just keep that in mind. You do need to essentially look at the competition if you want a much larger back seat. So it's been about 5 years since I last drove a Land Rover product with the 5-liter supercharged V8. So let's see if this thing is just as crazy as I remember, shall we? Wow. Best sounding exhaust that I've heard on an SUV so far? Maybe so. 550 horsepower is a lot of power. Ooh. Oh, listen to those, the farting noises when this thing shifts. Oh my God, for a car that weighs almost 5,000 pounds, it certainly does not feel that way when you really put your foot into it. Now the Velar definitely, in my opinion, is probably the ultimate Range Rover for several reasons. One, it's based off of the Jaguar F-Pace platform, which when I first drove that car with the supercharged V6, I fell in love with it. This is the one that has the supercharged V8 from the F-Pace with the exact same horsepower. Listen to that engine. Wow, that noise is so good. And the 8-speed automatic, it's the ZF one. And it just really reads your minds. It shifts so quickly. Oh, it really makes you wonder how does it shift so quickly? How does it read your mind so well? The engine just has torque and power everywhere. Oh. And even when you start messing with the paddles, it will rev match. Ooh, and the farting noises. God, I could never get tired of listening to that. But anyways, I'm addicted to the power. Obviously, I'm addicted to the power, but how is the handling of the Velar? Well, for a car that weighs, almost 5,000 pounds, it hides its mass very well. The steering surprisingly talks to you. In dynamic mode, the suspension kind of hunkers down. It goes into a sports setting. And it really shrinks. It really feels like you're driving kind of like a tall sports sedan, and that's the beauty about the Velar. Is out of all the Range Rover products I've driven the Big Daddy Range Rover, the Range Rover Sport, now the Velar, the Evoque as well. This is the one that has a nice balance to it. I mean, obviously the Evoque is even smaller, but it just doesn't have the powertrain to go with the, the small dimensions of it. This is like perfect in terms of acceleration, in terms of handling, in terms of ride quality. Even though I've got these massive 22s, it surprisingly rides pretty decently well over the bumps. And it stays very flat, offers lots of grip. Even in wet roads, I noticed when I drove this car in the rain, it just grips for days. It inspires so much confidence. I'm sitting here getting a massage, and it's one of the best massages I can get in the business. I mean, this car just feels elegant, it feels classy, it feels expensive. There's a reason why the Land Rover brand, has such a loyal following. Even though they don't have the best reputation for reliability, it really doesn't matter if you're gonna lease one of these things, and that's what I recommend to people all the time. If you got money to burn and you wanna be in a new car all the time, lease one of these, because What a noise. What an incredible, oh, incredible noise. Whew. And now they did put bigger brakes on this one, which it's going to need bigger brakes because it's got a lot of horsepower that's got to wrangle down. And the pedal always feels really strong. The car just handles so dynamically well. The visibility is also pretty good. I can see very much the typical Land Rover visibility. You have this big commanding view of the road. It's right over the hood, big side mirrors. My Tester does have all the driver assistance stuff, so it has full speed range adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, lane departure alert, pedestrian detection, you know, backup 360 camera, rear cross traffic alert. It has all that stuff, but it is optional. That's something to keep in mind. Some of the competition makes it standard. But overall, I find very little faults with this car aside from the fact that it's kind of a gas guzzler. I mean, 15, 20 mpg, and I've been averaging around 16 mpg, which actually isn't too bad. On the highway, I got it up to about 20. So it's right on the money. Remember to put premium gas in this thing. So you obviously got to pay to play. But boy, when you do pay for this thing, you're treated to a ride that is just near perfect in terms of its luxury, in terms of its, you know, elegance, in terms of the presence out on the road. I like this car more than the Jaguar F-Pace. I mean, I haven't driven the F-Pace SVR, but I just like the interior design of this better. I like the fact that Land Rover still builds in some off-road credibility. It's not going to be as much, of course, as the Range Rover. Remember, there's no low-range transfer case. The infotainment system here is definitely a sour point. I just wish it was a lot quicker to respond than it actually is. It's really inexcusable how sluggish it is sometimes. But man, if you can afford the gas for the supercharged V8, it is definitely the powertrain to get. I just can't imagine how gutless this car feels with the 2-liter turbo. I would just probably skip that. I'd say the Velar at least needs the supercharged V6, which, I mean, to be honest, this engine is an old engine. Same with the supercharged V6. Land Rover just replaced that engine with a new inline 6 that's turbocharged, supercharged, and electrified. But man, I'm gonna miss the sound of that glorious, glorious V8. Wow, what a joy, what a treat. So when Land Rover first announced the Velar coming back in 2018, I was really confused because I didn't think that Land Rover needed another Range Rover model. Remember, this is the 4th version to carry the Range Rover family. And honestly, after spending a week with the all-new Range Rover Velar, I have to say it slots very nicely into the Range Rover family because I spent some time in the Range Rover Evoque, which I felt was just too small a vehicle to be used practically for most Americans. Its styling was also very nice, which the Velar essentially has the same look as the Evoque, but in a much bigger, more mid-sized package. Now, of course, if you're going to start comparing it to the Range Rover Sport, which is about 6 inches taller, the Velar definitely has a much sleeker look to it. This is a car that competes with vehicles like the Audi Q8, the BMW X6, and the Mercedes-Benz GLE Coupe, which makes the Velar, again, the more stylistic choice. And to be honest, I think it's better looking versus all of those other competitors, including Land Rover's own models and its sister car, the Jaguar F-Pace. And I have to say, spending some time with the V8 version, the Mac Daddy of the Velar, this is an SUV that tricks you into thinking you're driving a sports sedan. You could seriously get into a lot of trouble with this car with the law because you can't feel the speed. The engine makes an incredible noise, so you're always wanting to dip into the throttle with every chance you get. And even though it's a Land Rover, you know, that promises off-road credibility, it will handle extremely well out on a back road. The car does feel heavy at times, but it also feels extremely planted, and with the adjustable air suspension, you could theoretically still take this thing off-roading, but just know that it's not going to have the same kind of off-road capability as a Land Rover Defender or the Big Daddy Range Rover because it doesn't quite have the same kind of ground clearance that you can get, and its 4-wheel drive system is a little bit different. It does not include a low-range transfer case like some of its sister vehicles. Now, with all that said, what's it going to cost to put a Range Rover Velar in your driveway if you're looking to buy one of these? Well, Land Rover has actually priced it extremely well because it fits right between the Evoque and the Sport and the lineup at a starting price of around $56,300. This makes the Velar about $12,000 more than an Evoque, but also about $15,000 less versus a Range Rover Sport. Now, of course, compared to the competition, this also makes the Velar about $10,000 less expensive than a Q8 or a BMW X6, but that does come with an asterisk because the base engine in the Velar is a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, which I imagine most people will probably pass. When you go for the supercharged V6, that's going to cost you roughly $10,000 more. This V8 version here starts at $90,000, but it does compete with cars like the BMW X6M, the Mercedes-Benz GLE 63S, the AMG model, and of course the upcoming Audi RS Q8 because it has 550 horsepower. Now my tester here is pretty light on the options. It has a total sticker price of around $96,000, which if you guys wanted, you could literally spec in the $10,000 paint and every option on this car, and you could easily spend over $120,000. But as you can see, when you keep the options in check, the Velar is actually a relatively good value. Just keep in mind, of course, Land Rovers tend to not have a great reputation for reliability and build quality. This one here was built very well. There's no squeaks and rattles, but I wouldn't trust it in the long haul. I would say lease this thing. And honestly, it's a great car to have for the next 3 years, which most people in this segment tend to do that anyways. Well, with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on this 2020 Land Rover Range Rover Velar SV Autobiography Dynamic Edition. I think I got it right. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews. Like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.